The four horsemen to the apocalypse are the first four seals. So this is probably, for me, this is the pinnacle of excitement in the book of Revelation, other than chapter 20, 19 and 20 when he comes back. But this little section of text is like so insightful, and I think maybe primarily it's because where we are right now. We're in the midst of these four horsemen that are running loose and rampant over the globe, and it's only going to get worse. But we're seeing the signs of all four are running. Don't think that they run in order. Okay, the first white, where are you? White, oh, there you are, run. Okay, done. Next, black, where are you? Run. No. They're all being released. Maybe not simultaneously, but soon after the next one appears. And so they're all galloping over the globe right now. And we're going to see that today. Parenthetically, as you probably know, I'm doing a little thing, financial thing and geopolitical thing upstairs if we have space. Otherwise, it'll be in that room there. After the service, we're going to start 15 to 30 minutes. But please remember, the Costco run is outside. Go partake of that as need be, and then we'll get started. You're going to have to probably grab something to eat in the interim, so grab something to tide you over. Maybe in the Costco run, they'll have something that looks intriguing, or maybe you can run or hopefully you maybe even brought something. So what I want to do is just touch base. We talked about the white horse rider, which is the first horse rider last week. A few little points that we didn't have time to cover. Recall that these four horsemen represent the first four seals on a document that we got introduced in the previous chapter, chapter 5. And these seals were on this scroll, and we recognized them as authorities rather than ink blots with a seal, a signet ring embedded in them. The concept is more Hebrew. That was a very Greek concept. These were signatures or authorities. A signature in Hebrew, or a name in Hebrew, is an authority, okay? So there were 7 authorities on this scroll. We recognize that scroll to be a marriage contract, an ancient document that's been in the Hebrew culture for centuries. And if you know about this tradition, you would know that there's 7 people that sign a ketubah, a Hebrew marriage contract, and they commit to have certain authorities over the agreement therein written in the document. Okay. Now, the bride and the groom signed it, but there's 5 other people that have the authority and the responsibility to call them on the carpet when they're not doing the agreement therein. Okay. How many of you feel like they've been given the responsibility to give oversight? And it's not always going, hey, Joe, clean up your act. It might be, good job, you're doing well, my good and faithful servant, right? So these 7 authorities are being poured out on the earth. Unfortunately, God is not, and these authorities are not applauding, are they? Until we get to the last 3, there's some that could be taken maybe like God isn't all the judgment isn't coming, but we'll get to that in ensuing lessons. These first 4, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, are clearly God is saying, look, Joe, look, humanity, you're not doing well. You need to make these changes in your life. And in my experience, God only brings this kind of judgment after a long history of God trying to woo you in a positive manner. He's not looking to come with the hammer. He's looking to come with love, relationship, patience, encouragement. Hey, you're going the wrong way? Go this way. We've got ice cream over here. But sometimes we choose to persist in our own ways, and then God needs to try different tactics to get your attention. And that's what the book of Revelation is all about. It's trying different tactics, but all these tactics are not unforeseen. They come right out of Deuteronomy. They come right out of Torah, because in that book, it says that if you do these things, if you go this way, I'll bless you and reward you and be close to you and protect you. But if you choose to go this way, you have every right to do that. But let me just tell you the consequences. It's like putting water in the gas tank. I built you, I know how you work, but if you persist in putting water in the gas tank, you ain't gonna work very well, right? That's what Torah is all about. Choose to go this way and you'll look good going down the road. Choose to go this way and you're parked in the gutter all the time. So choose which way you'll go. Satan did not make us. He does not know what is the best for us. So many people choose his way, unfortunately. So anyway, we've got this first horse rider. We've identified this horse rider as deception. We talked about last week how some people claim that this horse rider represents Yeshua coming in a pre-rapture kind of way, and he's saving all of his people and taking them up to heaven in this rapture theory. We dispelled that hopefully last week. And we talked about why. There was one other point that we didn't get to that I wanted to talk about. It says that he has a crown on his head. Let's read that. Okay, it says, then I saw when the Lamb broke one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying, as with a voice of thunder, come. I looked, and behold, a white horse, and the one who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. We talked about the bow last week. We talked about the whiteness last week. But what I didn't get a chance to talk about was the crown. Here, the Hebrew word for this crown is Otara. And this thing, you know what an Otara is? You all should know. Well, you see this thing right here on this tallit? If you own a tallit, you all own an Otara. I'll put this back on so you can hear me. Well, this guy, he's got the collar of a tallit on. Now, what is the most important part of a tallit? The tzitzit. Why? Because herein lies written in the means to tie, tzitzit is written, encoded, what? The name of God, right? I won't get into that today. But this guy has no intention to represent or sell God and his authority. This is what the woman with the issue of blood grabbed. It gets interpreted fringe, right? Because the translators are woefully ignorant of the fact and the issue about tzitzit. The tzitzit was known by the Hebrews as the source of power because it represented him. That's his name right there in these knots and wrappings. And Adam and I, from time to time, will do a lesson on these. And you'll notice there's some blue ones and some white ones. It all is imagery and metaphorical representations of God and his purity and royalty. Okay, but he has no intention of having his purity and royalty recognized by the King of Kings. What is he going to do? He's going to claim to be the King of Kings. We'll get there. It arrives in chapter 13, so we're 5 chapters away. But this guy is evil because he's a false McCoy. He's a counter covenant that is going to represent himself to be the real creator God. Okay? That's why all he wants is the collar. He wants the Otara. Why? Because if you look at most Talits, the Otara is the flashy part. It's the one that catches everybody's eye, right? Because it's beautiful and it's pretty. And this guy's all after show. This guy's going to be a showman. He's not going to suffer from being melancholy. He's going to be a church barker. A circus barker, right? I wish he was going to be a church barker. But he's going to be he's going to be an outgoing, flamboyant, in my estimation anyway, person. That's why he's wearing the Otara. He's a showboat. Read the book of Daniel, the last few chapters, and you'll see this showboat appearing again and again and again. He's not going to be shy. Nor will he be, unfortunately, meek. So, the real Messiah does show up, riding a white horse, wearing a crown, and he has a weapon, not a bow, but a sword coming out of his mouth, right? And which is a metaphorical representation that God doesn't need a weapon. His weapon is his word, right? To kind of quote a movie, it says, I brought you into the world and I'm going to take you out, right? I don't know what that comes from, but God spoke us into being and the creation, and he's going to take us out in the same way. He doesn't need the sword. He just needs his word. And the sword here represents his word, doesn't it? So we do see a white horse. But what's going on here? We're going to see, and I'm going to point it out every time, in these chapters, we've got a guy that's attempting to copycat and look like the real God and try to fulfill prophecy, but it's a trick. Amen. So, enough of him. Let's move on to the next horse rider. The next horse rider, what color is it? Red, right. Now, most people go red. Oh, they got to be the Russians. There's an Ezekiel chapter 38, 39 that talks about this Russian Gog, Magog. You've all heard of those guys are, if you do the historical study in the migration patterns of ancient mankind, Gog and Magog, their descendants turn out to be today's Russians. So they've got to be Gog and Magog because what do we call them? They're the Reds, right? Or maybe they could be the Chinese because, they've got these dragons on their flags and on their symbolism, national symbolizes, and they're always colored red, aren't they? So it's got to be them. Okay, what have we learned? We've learned that the New Testament is interpreted by using the Old Testament imagery, right? So, do we ever find, is there anything significant about something in the Old Testament that gets called red? What's red represent? Blood, right? But this imagery isn't about good. This guy takes peace from the earth. He has power to take peace from the earth, and he causes war. So we need a symbol in the Old Testament that represents red. Now, what might that be? You guys are so smart. There's a story in the Old Testament where Esau comes back. Esau is the son of who? Isaac. And his bro, Jacob, right? Jacob and Esau. That should ring a bell about a story, right? Jacob is the one who's sent back to the fatherland, area, Mesopotamia Valley, to get a wife. Remember, he gets to by trickery of their. Anyway, everybody on the same wavelength here? These two brothers are hanging around in camp. Esau comes back from a hunting trip because that was his speciality, right? And Jacob is doing his responsibility because he's the camp manager. Okay, he's not some wimp like the text implies. He has the responsibility of running the family business, in essence. He's responsible to make sure all the servants have their jobs, doing a good job. He's queuing and Aing all of those issues that are coming up in their family. Esau's doing his own thing, where actually he was the firstborn. That was his job. But Jacob is doing his job because Esau is abandoning his responsibilities. So Jacob's covering. Jacob comes back, he's hungry, and he's willing to trade his birthright. I'm sorry, who did I say? Jacob. Esau, I'm sorry, not Jacob. Esau is coming in, and Jacob's like stirring the pot, taking care of business. I'm sure servants have made it, but in the Bible you'll see, and even in our day, we'll see the president did this, but actually he had ambassadors that did that, right? It's the same sort of thing. So Jacob is responsible to, at all times, have a pot in the middle of the camp that anybody that gets hungry or comes back from the field can access and have a quick bowl of soup, right? So this soup, Jacob trades for his birthright. And what color is it? Red. It's red. And I think I have the verse here. Somewhere in here. Somewhere, hold on. Yeah, here we go. Genesis 25:30. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please let me have a mouthful of that red stuff there, for I am exhausted." Therefore, the previous verse talks about his trade in the birthright. Therefore, he was called Edom by name. And so were his descendants from that point on, multiple places, in multiple books, way after he's died, like Obadiah. I mean, Obadiah's over 1,000 years after, refers to Edom. Isaiah and Ezekiel, they do not use his name, given name. They use his name that in other words, he was called Edom because the people, his family, were so astonished in a negative way that he would do such a foolish thing as to trade some red soup for his birthright. So, does anybody know people that do really good or bad things and they get a nickname? He got a nickname, and forever he has been known as Edom, which means red. It comes from the word, anybody know what word it comes from? Spelled exactly the same. Adam, right? It's just a little vowel point change. So it's Edom instead of Adam. Why do you suppose Adam was named Adam? What? Yeah, the red earth. Exactly. He was made from the dust of the ground, the earth of the ground, and it tends to be red, right? So Edom acquired this name, and forevermore he was referred to as red. I believe that this red horse rider is red because it's giving us a hint of who is composed, what people groups make up the armies that are going to make this attack, because they attack Israel. And there's like 4 prophecies. Okay, I'll get it. Well, we'll switch now. Question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the pot that was being stirred was for anyone who was hungry, why would Esau have to sell his birthright to have some of it?
Good question. I don't know, but he was foolish enough to make it, which is just, that's why he was called Edom, because it made no sense. So there's 4 prophecies in the Old Testament that talk about a war during the end. The beauty of the book of Revelation, let me rephrase this. There's multiple, way more than 4. There's 4 that talk about this war in the Old Testament. And what this book allows you to do is to grab those 4 prophecies and hang them in the slot of time and sequence through time so we can know what's coming next, right? So these 4 locations are Obadiah is one, Ezekiel 35, Isaiah 34, and Psalms 83. Psalms 83 you can go and read it when you go home. It has a list, and it sounds like it's off the pages of the New York Times. It says that these people will secretly meet to plan the destruction of Israel. Does that sound like Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, some in Jordan, some in Lebanon, certainly Syria, Egypt? Does that sound like that's exactly what they do. And when you look at the list, there's a list, and you have to do a lot of homework to find out what David is using ancient names, very ancient names for these people groups. Guess who almost all of them go back to? Take a wild guess. They all go back to Esau, his descendants. Like when the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, they get attacked from the rear by somebody. Who are they called? Amalekites. Who are they? Descendants of Esau. Okay? So, we see these 4 prophecies talking about, and Psalms 83 is the only one that gives a list of the people that attack. And if you do the research, I have it all for you already done. If you want to just get it for free, it's in, I think volume 2. I think, isn't it, Jody? I think it's in 2. Yeah, it would be the seals. So volume 2, I have all the research for every one of the names. And there's one excluded and one included that are enemies of Israel, but not descendants of Esau. Anybody know those 2? Who's excluded out of this list? Very interesting exclusion. Egypt. Egypt is excluded from this list of allies that decide to wipe Israel off the map. We've had the 6-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, the War of Independence. Those aren't in the order of history. And guess who has been involved in all of them? Egypt. So this war doesn't include the Egyptians. So this war hasn't happened yet, because every time the Arabs have had allied themselves together and done a major attack, it's always included the Egyptians. But this time, in Psalms 83, Egyptians gone. So, I've been at this for a few multiple decades, right? Since I've loved this whole book since I could remember, I've been looking for a war that excluded the Egyptians. Well, there was no hope of that for decades until around the 90s. Something started happening. They made an alliance with Israel. And that alliance has been shaky, but it's held all of this time. And today, when there's talk of war, the Egyptians are out of it. They're not involved in these games that the rest of Esau's descendants are making. There's one other group that is included in Psalms 83 that is not descendants of Esau. Anybody know what that group is? Very important group. They're Persians, the Assyrians, the ancient Assyrians, which their name changes. It's the same group of people. Ancient Assyrians. Then, 6th century BC, this different group attacks Israel. The Assyrians attack Israel 7th century BC. I'm going in and out. Is my battery dying? Okay. They attack, and they're called the Assyrians. A couple hundred years later, they attack again, but they're called Persians. What? Same group. Okay. Iran today, if you go back to their most ancient names, they're called the Assyrians. Yes.
Yeah, I was just saying, I've been reading, I get this stuff from Israel all the time, and I've been reading that Russia is joining now with those same countries you mentioned to bond together to come against Israel.
Yeah, if you look around the geopolitical, I'll be talking a little bit about this in the next thing. That's more focused on what to do with what is in fact happening in our banking world. Maybe we'll touch on that a little bit. We'll see. There's a lot of pieces being moved around on the chessboard geopolitically and financially, and unfortunately, they're all spiritual. It's all spiritually motivated. There's spirits moving the pieces around, and they all have an agenda to bring things to a culmination. When? I don't know. But I think there's some hints. This group that is not from Esau are the ancient Assyrians, and they're listed in Psalms 83. They're a long way from Israel. What's their problem? Who's hated Israel the longest? Assyria, which we call today Iran. Now, when I say Assyria, I'm not referring to Syria. Syria is immediately north and of Israel, and their capital is Damascus. Not referring to them. I'm talking to Assyria, which is Iran. Okay? Don't get the two mixed up. They have two completely different heritages coming from the Table of Nations in Genesis 10. So, what's going on today? I mean, not literally today, but even the last few weeks, over the course of the last 10 years, you've seen that Iran has come to the forefront, and they're the ones funding all the puppets, all the Esau's, all the descendants of Esau's, are being funded and supplied by their overlord, Iran, to bring forth the machinations of the enemy. And there's just very recently, the last few days, there's been a huge increase in missile activity. Whether this will die down, who knows? I don't know. It's just interesting when we see so many other things that are going on in the globe today, that because this war, we will learn about what happens due to this war, and it doesn't just stay in the Mideast. And when we get there, we'll talk about where it spreads to, where I've speculated it'll spread to, and all of those areas that that I've speculated decades ago that it would spread to are now hotspots, ready to explode at a moment's notice. We'll see. I don't know. This all may die down. Same with the banking problems. We'll talk about that afterwards. So I'm trying to address in some of this, if you haven't picked it all already up. There's a lot of opinion and interpretations about what these horses represent and what they represent in the here and now. And so a lot of people think that this war is Armageddon. And so when we see the armies surrounding Israel attack, and we see this red horse rider make its move, this is Armageddon. This is the end. At the end thereof, God will come back, or some people, pre-tribbers, think that just before the beginning of this, we'll all be taken out. Adam and I do not believe in that thesis. That's a thesis that was made up about 150 years ago, did not exist in any meaningful way prior to that. Let's just say that. The problem with this thesis is that there's, barring the war at the end of the 1,000-year reign, okay? Before God comes back on that white horse with the sword coming out of his mouth, there's 3 wars in the revelational text. A lot of people interpret those 3 wars as descriptions of the same thing. And what I'm here to tell you and to teach you is I don't believe that they're the same war because of multiple reasons. One of which is that the means of slaughter, wars slaughter people. The means of slaughter and death are different. We're going to get to that, but this war, the means of slaughtering mankind is wild beasts, famine, pestilence, and war. Okay? Sounds like a good old time. The means of the next war, we'll get to it, it's in chapter 9, is fire and brimstone. No famine, no pestilence, fire and brimstone. That sounds a little nuclear. And the means of the last war in chapter 16 is these bowls of judgment and then the sword. He speaks the army dead. And the amount, the percentage of victims is different. This war we're going to learn when we get to the fourth horseman, the 4th seal. 1/4 of the population succumbs. It has power over 1/4. And it's global. The text is clear that it's global. And it's backed up in the Old Testament that this is a global phenomenon. If you killed everybody in the Mideast, you would not get to 1/4 of the world's population. Okay? So we know that it goes way beyond 1/4 of the world population. What's the percentage of the next war? where they die of fire and brimstone? A third. Very good, very good. A third of the population. By the way, one quarter of at the beginning is exactly the same as 1/3 of the remaining, right? So now you've killed, in essence, 1/2 of the Earth's population. You know, there's a passage, which is why in the Bible study I'm kind of anxious to breach into the book of Isaiah. There's a passage that says, I think it's like 9 or 10 or somewhere in there. It says that I will make man rare upon the earth. Rare is pretty rare. I don't know. There's 8 billion of us now, but what's rare to God? I don't know. The second wars has influence over 1/3. And it says he has power to kill 1/3, the angels that are. And then at the end, how many succumb at Armageddon? The entire army. So it goes 1/4, 1/3, 100%. That doesn't mean 100% of people on the globe in the last one, but he is taking out the opposition. And it's certainly 100% of the army. That army will die a miserable death, and because they are the core element of those that oppose God. Now, is God a mean ogre? No, he loves them just as much as he loves us. The difference, and the only difference, is their choice. They've chosen to love another and obey another, where the other group, hopefully all of us, is we chose to listen and obey to the real God, right? That is the difference. There's no other difference. It's not like, oh, I got a ticket that says, it's right in my wallet here. The difference is relationship, trust, and reliance. If you have it, you do. If you don't have that, you don't. And of course, as you don't and persist in not having, do you draw closer or do you fall farther away from the truth, capital T truth? Of course, you fall farther away. There's multiple places in the Bible that talks about revivals and great fallings away. Zero, I've been